Cartographers, Hypnospace Outlaw, and Root. This is Staying In.
I gave up caffeine, actually, when I was doing the journalism thing. I ended up giving up caffeine because obviously I was working lots of hours, and I ended up having lots and lots of caffeine, and I ended up quitting it all cold turkey, and I thought I could just give it all up, but it's not.
Your body says, "Hey, I got a minute,"
and your body says, "Hey." So I see that you're not giving me that caffeine or any of that sugar and taurine that I've been so enjoying over the last 6 to 9 months. So instead, what I'm going to give you in return is migraines. So,
What was your caffeine delivery of choice?
Well, so I would have about 6 or 7 cups of coffee throughout the day.
Then you'd have lunch.
Blimey,
Yeah.
Jesus, 6 or 7. I have 1 in the morning.
Right.
And I'm like shaking.
Well, this is how bad it got. So 6 or 7 coffees during the day, and I would usually then towards the end of the evening, and then into the night, because I would usually work until like midnight or something like that. I'd usually be on I think it's called Blue Bolt. Which is it's like a knockoff Red Bull. So I'd have like 2 of those, and then cans of Coke throughout the rest of the day. And obviously I was smoking at this time and doing all that and eating really badly and stuff like that. And then I just went, you know what? I'm just gonna get healthy. So I got rid of all the caffeine and I quit smoking. And my body was like, right. Well,
I better say you didn't just like ease yourself out of it. You just literally just quit everything.
Yeah, it was somewhat of a shock to the system.
Well, I've not done anything like that, but I'm doing a bit of a detox at the moment where I'm like, for like 5 days, I've cut out kind of carbs, sugar, caffeine, all that stuff. So I don't drink coffee, but I drink tea. I drink Coca-Cola all the time. So right now I have a can of Diet Coke with no caffeine. So the no caffeine version. So there's no sugar, no calories, no caffeine. It's okay.
Yeah.
Does it make the same satisfying sound when you open it down though?
There is that satisfying when you open it though, so that's okay. But yeah, so I had the headaches. I had my body saying, "Hey, now come on. We had a good thing going here. Let's not mess things up."
Yeah.
So yeah, I had that. I mean, I was thinking when I heard people talk about these kind of detox stuff, like after a few days, you feel revitalized. I'm like, yes, I'm looking forward to that. I still haven't had it. I should have had it after like day 3, and I'm on day 5, and I've not had it. You know how like this detox is supposed to make you healthier? It's not. I've got an ear infection, so that's great. I woke up this morning at 1 a.m. and then suddenly couldn't get back to sleep till 5 a.m. This is on my day off. So my day off that I'd booked, it wasn't a good start to the day, really. So extra energy at the wrong time of day, which was great. I then had to go to IKEA and spend the rest of the day building furniture. So yeah, detoxing's fun.
Yeah. Have you ever, because I've never done this, I've always wanted to do it. Have you ever fully given up just sugar? Like,
I thought you were going to say just in general.
I just did some caffeine maths basically, and on average every day, Pete, you're averaging about 612 milligrams of caffeine. That's at a minimum, really.
Yeah, probably.
And I was surprised at this. Like the recommended is about 400, which is 10 cans of Coke.
What?
Oh my gosh!
I could do that.
Now let's just be very, very clear for a second. Hold on. When we say recommended, what we really mean is no more than, not necessarily have this amount of caffeine every day.
Actually, this is the exact wording in this article. It says, how much is too much? And it says, up to 400 milligrams of caffeine a day appears to be safe for most healthy adults. Appears to be. You were definitely on the cusp of too much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I ended up with having like mad heart palpitations and all that good stuff. And it's funny, isn't it? It's funny. You don't realise what put like the stuff that you put in your body really, it's like a chemistry set, because it basically is, right? You can do these little experiments on your body. You can get rid of all caffeine, and then something will happen. Some chemical simulation will then happen, and then your brain goes, okay, well, if we don't get that, then let's just torment him for a bit. And then like, and it's the same with like sugars and fats and all that other sort of stuff, right? If you go on like, you know, some low carb diet or something like that, you can see how your body changes and adapts to deal with it, which I think is like, it's really fascinating. Super dangerous, probably, but
Yeah, I bet you were like Bradley Cooper in Limitless.
What was like when you like gave up the caffeine, Pete? What was the biggest change in yourself once you like got through the other stage of your?
He went to bed.
When you got through the other stage of your detox, like what was the biggest benefit?
not spending about 80 quid a month on caffeine. I mean, in all honesty, like that was a really big part of it. The other thing is, the big benefit I had was it was easier to when you're on that amount, like you are chemically kind of
you're propping yourself up.
Yeah, you're propping yourself up. You don't feel quite right, and you do feel tired a lot, right? So you always feel like you're stealing from the next day. Mm-hmm. Whereas like when you come off of it, it feels like, to begin with, and I felt really tired to begin with, but then like I feel like you get a bit more energy, I'm sure. And Dan, I'm sure, well, you're getting your energy at different times, but like you do get that sense eventually of like your body saying, okay, well, I guess I'll give you the energy then. Or you find ways to get your head out of it and actually physically motivate yourself to do things like, you use an exercise bike, or you
the less said about the exercise bike, the better. Like,
let's not talk about the exercise bike.
It's just the fact you also pointed to the wrong place in your room where we can clearly see the exercise bike. I just imagine, Pete, you were at that stage, a bit like that episode of Futurama when Fry drinks 100 coffees.
Oh, I love that episode.
It's incredible, and he's basically able to see through time.
As a journalist, it's a good skill.
To be able to see through time. Yeah. That's how the Reuters lot do it.
Oh, God.
Can I talk about a lovely thing that has happened during the current awful, unsettling climate we're in? As you probably know, that like lots of the geek industries that we know and love have, face obviously challenges like a number of businesses and a number of industries recently. Mm-hmm. My local board game cafe has shut its doors, but what it's done is it's set up a board game rental service.
What's the name of your local board game cafe, Kris?
It's Board Beans Cafe. It's Fraser and Betsy, and they are wonderful, wonderful human beings.
And so what have they done? They've got a rental service.
A rental service. It is honestly like if I could go back in time and speak to like 11-year-old Kris and say, look, 2020 is going to be a really awful time, but there are some really good people there and some lovely things that will happen that will, for a few hours at least, take your mind off it. Then I will be put at ease, because this is one of those things really, and it is such a wonderful thing where basically you can subscribe to different levels of subscription, different pay levels, and get different numbers of games. I get 4 games a month, and they just turn up at my door, and I get an email saying, do you want to renew your subscription for another month? And I go, yep. And what games would you like? I look at our list and you can see, okay, these are the ones that are in quarantine, these are the ones that are out, and these are the ones that are in stock. And it honestly, it's like I've been asked to do my Christmas list once a month. And Fraser turned up the other day and he had like a pile of boxes there. And he said, yeah, I've got a recommendation for you as well. Here's Blood Rage. I was like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to play that, but I just didn't feel like I could feasibly kind of find somebody to play that in my flat. But one of those games...
like someone hidden there.
Yeah, just secreted.
What will happen today? Will I find someone who will play Blood Rage with me?
Like just shake the box, just open the door and just shake the front door and shake the box. But one of the games I was lucky enough to play, because one of the beautiful things about this, one of the things I love about board game cafes in general, and Board Beans is great for this. It's a really lovely kind of atmosphere, and I've actually gone down there and I've done like themed evenings. Fraser was the one that introduced me to Scythe and Stonemaier games in general, and the reason why I was playing Viticulture in the last episode was because of Fraser. And is just that the quality of the game's there, but it's just a wonderful atmosphere. And one of the games I got in the post was Root, which I've always wanted to play, and I was unsure about playing it because there's a real cult following behind Root that people really love. It's a game that's 2 years old now. Pete, I know you played it at your board game cafe in Bristol.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And you'd waxed lyrical about it, and I'd always really, really wanted to play it, but it's so expensive online. But one of the reasons why I want to discuss it is two things. One, that I've just been able to get a copy to play from Fraser at the Board Game Cafe.
So you're showing off?
Yeah, I'm flexing.
Oh, look what I've got. I've got a nice game.
Flexing my cardboard. And two, it's actually going to come back in stock because they've just released 2 more expansions for this game. So now's a really good time to get Root.
So you mentioned that the game is quote expensive, but
Yeah.
but my belief is that's basically because of scalpers, right? It's usually not an expensive game.
It's not because of the company at all whatsoever. This is because the game has become so popular.
Yeah,
because it was I think it was believed it was Kickstarted. It was so popular that people just can't get enough of it, and there's not enough copies out there really to satisfy demand. I would define it as the cutest war game, and it's actually a bit of a Trojan horse, this game, because if you really like war games, but you're isolating with somebody who doesn't, and you want to scratch that itch, get Root.
So let's define our terms, Kris.
Yes.
Because draw the line.
Because when you say war games,
Yes.
what you mean is stuff along the lines of the classic is Risk. Of that sort of genre. It's not the Burrows and Badgers, for example. It's not like a tabletop skirmish miniatures game in this way.
No, it's not that at all. It kind of scratches that itch. It's a bit like the Coke that Dan's drinking right now. It just does the job. It's not like the full-blown kind of version. But that is not to render it a disservice, because actually this is something it's going to be on the table more and more for several reasons.
Yeah.
It's basically the Enid, Blyton, George R.R. Martin crossover you never thought you needed. It's one of the nicest war game experiences I've ever had. Because
really
I played a few war games. Sam and I played War of the Ring for several hours one day, and usually when Sam rolls a dice and he takes out my army, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm really kind of cursing. In Root, because it's so adorable, you go, oh, you wiped out my army. That's hilarious. Look at you, these cute little animals. Oh, hang on, you partnered with me and now you're stabbing me in the back. Oh, that's hilarious. And it's really interesting, this kind of paradox of emotions. You've got this very, very cute aesthetic. It is adorable, but actually behind it, it's really kind of cutthroat and quite sinister. It takes place, the game is set in this woodland, which is under the rule of the Marquis de Cats, who is this very angry but adorable set of orange cats whose lumber empire essentially dominates the forest. So they start the game already dominating the board. They're everywhere. They have overthrown the monarchy of birds that used to rule the forest, who are now being, isolated in one corner of the wood. But beneath the surface lies this spirit of rebellion, which is the Woodland Alliance. And then you've just got one character called the Vagabond, and it's just a single wooden figure who just goes off on his own little adventures. And if he wants to, he can kind of engage and help you out. But really, he can just go off and do his own quests, and he'll only help you if you can help him. And what I'm hinting at here is the major USP for this game is that it is an asymmetrical game. So what I mean by that is that, yes, there are turns, everyone does, but what each player does is different to the other. Now, there are obviously merits and limitations to that, because when you're teaching the game first time, it's 4 times as much of the teach, because you have to explain what each particular character does for each person and to everyone else.
That's the thing that's put me off.
Yeah, but actually, it's really easy.
Yeah, it's really
because
easy.
You've got a very neat player map that tells you everything you need to do.
Yeah.
The setup is dead easy. I was actually surprised how easy it is to pick up, because you get a lot of stuff in there. You don't just get a rule book. You get also, a recommended tutorial guide, for setting up, but also you get what is called the Law of Ruth, which is this quite intimidating glossary of stuff to kind of remind you of what's going on. And I thought, oh no, am I going to be able to teach this sufficiently, let alone learn it? But actually, it's almost actually over-explaining, I would say, which is a rarity, because it is actually quite intuitive, much more so than, say, Spirit Island, Sam, which we spoke about a few pods ago.
So even though this is is there four different
factions? Yeah.
Factions. Have you been playing this 2-player mainly?
Yeah, 2 to 3 player. I kind of doubled up in one area just so I could get that feeling of a 3-player game.
Because I was going to say, how does it work as a 2-player?
What's quite good is they actually give you recommended pairings. They are conscious of that fact, and they're worried that it might seem a little bit unfair, but actually the game is surprisingly well balanced. I know there's been some chat online about some characters being more overpowered than others, but actually what tends to happen is that players will just see, hang on, they're winning, and it's actually a bit like Catan. It's about those partnerships that are forged around the table or broken up that make the game interesting.
So are the win states then are the same for everyone? Is it just a points based? The
win state is points based. You can go into combat and it's just rolling 2 dice. It's a really interesting kind of experience, I must admit. And it was one that I was really wary about buying, because one of the worries about a game like this is that once you've played every faction, which is really the lure of going back and playing it, is there enough there for you to keep coming back? And I would argue there is, because there's enough variety within that just through things such as crafting, the chance of the dice. There is on the other side of the board a completely different setup. There's you can specify what type of clearings you have on the other side of the board, so you can make the game board unique every time you play, which is not often talked about in reviews actually. And Kyle Ferrin's artwork is just adorable.
Oh, it's incredible.
And it just fosters, I don't know what it is, but it just fosters that sense of no hard feelings.
Yeah, There are cards that you'll pull that are literally the card is stabbed in the back, or like murdered on the road, and things like that, really horrible terms. And it's just drawn in this cheeky, cheeky little characters. Oh, it's not. It's horrid, but it's really well put together. The thing I love about it is just how thematic the whole thing feels. It gets across what Civilization doesn't. Each of the different factions feels really different to play in this war game. If you're playing as the Vagabond, you really do have to lean into what that character is about and kind of start to role play as the Vagabond.
And as Pete alluded to there, it's not surprising that this game has spawned its own RPG that's set in the world of Ruth.
Yeah.
And I mentioned at the beginning there's some expansions coming out. There was one that came out the same year this came out called the Riverfolk expansion, which includes a lizard cult. So you've got cultists there, and you've got a Riverfolk company, which are basically a marketplace. So you've got for those who are interested in their kind of economic board games, they're satisfied here. So there's almost each faction is a different genre of board game, and they're all really beautifully meshing. The 2 most recent expansions are the Underworld expansion, which has the Moles, which are a rival royalty, a duchy that are underground, and you've got this kind of corporate espionage spiring, which are the Crows. And if that's not enough, they've also released the Clockwork expansion, which is an automaton system. So I could play this by myself, but make the factions automatons, which I'm playing against. So it's and it's also great because it means that if you and I were to play it, Pete, it could be us two versus the game. We could actually team up together, so you can make it a cooperative game.
I'd like that.
Through that. So there's so many different shades and permutations here, and I honestly genuinely thought, okay, this is a bit gimmicky now. They're clearly just releasing more animals because people have got bored playing the same factions over and over again. Yeah. But genuinely, I was pleasantly surprised by this, and I was always on the fence as to whether I would purchase this or not. But when it comes back in stock and pre-orders are there and I can get it from Leader Games, I will probably buy it.
You know how last time we had a chat, I was genuinely surprised by a game and it sort of subverting expectations.
Well, guess what, guys?
Well, guess what? My expectations have been subverted once again as to what a game is that I've been playing recently. So have you guys heard of a game called Hypnospace Outlaw? Have you heard of this?
Yes, I have.
You
Yes.
know this one? Okay, so
Vaguely.
vaguely. Okay, so so it's going to sound really dumb when I describe it, because in a way. It's kind of a dumb idea for a game, and basically, it's also fantastic. You know how? Did you guys ever have a GeoCities page?
I did not.
So I did.
I am not surprised.
That does not surprise me.
Hang on. Should we try and guess what he talked about on his GeoCities page?
Yeah, go on.
I think it would have been music he likes.
Yeah, it would all have been about the music.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna take a wild guess at just like The Cure or something like that.
The Cure. The Cure. Damn. I don't think I've ever listened to The Cure in my life. Not knowingly, anyway. No, it was for the band that I was in when I was in my late teens. Yeah. So. For the young people who have come to us for the fortnight coverage that we do,
that's coming up just at the end of the show. Dan's fortnight section.
Stick around for that.
Season 6 is on its way.
Yeah.
There's a weird thing that if you fast forward it,
you just don't get it.
It doesn't play.
Yeah.
You have to listen to the whole thing. It knows. It's like DRM.
Yeah. And basically,
what was the band called, Pete?
What was the band called? I will never reveal that information because
it'll be something like My Lonely Disaster. My Heartbroken Desk.
Something along that. Yeah.
Peter Willington and the Crickets.
Yeah, something about that.
6 pockets full of despair.
I played on the same stage as Matt Bellamy from Muse.
Not at the same time, though.
Not at the same time, but
I'm sure we've probably all been on the same stage as someone famous in our lives.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there you go. So anyway, my GeoCities page is all about that. But GeoCities was basically this sort of democratization of the internet whereby anybody could have a GeoCities page, because obviously you would go from your homepage of Yahoo search to sign up for your GeoCities page, and that would kind of be this. It was this really super easy way of making a website back in the day, that when really making proper websites was really all about like actual kind of lines of code and stuff like that. It was all drag and drop. It was kind of the precursor to websites like Wix and the other one, WordPress and stuff like that. That's what that was about, and that is what this game is about. So this is about a late 1990s alternative future where there is this software, and I believe it is the Hypnospace. And the entire game is that you're an enforcer. Well, the game starts off that you are this enforcer, and the idea is that you are you've been given access to Hypnospace, and you have like these areas that you patrol. And they are literally websites. So you should think of them as old school websites, spinning GIFs. And it takes this idea that was like Yahoo, because I remember like submitting my band's page to Yahoo directories. Like you would have directories of content, and because there wasn't that much stuff on the internet. So you are basically enforcing this stuff. So you have these zones that you patrol, and you're looking for content that is illegal or like violent or like bullying or a scam or something along those lines. And you essentially are given these like missions where you have to go and find these things, and then use your tools, your Hypnospace Enforcer tools, to then ban the content. So one of the first, and I won't spoil much about the game, but one of the first things that you get is this mission where you have to go and find infringement of IP law. And that sounds really tedious, but it's actually very, very, very well put together and very funny. So the whole thing is hilarious. So basically, like there's this image of this like cartoon animal from like the 50s or 60s. That's the conceit. And Gooper. There we are, Gooper. So like you ban these images on these people's websites, and then later on down the line in the game, those websites change and they say things like, man, I can't believe the enforcers came in and took all those images off. And so now suddenly, because you took all those images down of Gooper, now the Hypnospace, the pages now start to talk more about the enforcers are coming in and like free Gooper and like all these like little social petitions that were going on at the time. So another thing one of the things that they go on to later is this idea that you get to learn about these characters that are in the world. So for example, there's I think his name's Zane, and he has this website called Zane Rocks, and it is, Dan, exactly what you assumed my website would have been, right? Zane is just an absolute ass, and he's young, and he's just allowed on the internet, on this version of the internet for the first time, and he's able to speak his mind, and he's not being subverted. And again, like in that era, this was a really powerful tool for young people to get their voice heard. And unfortunately, they didn't have the sophistication and the sort of like cultural intelligence by this period of time to actually realize that they shouldn't be doing some of the things or talking about some of the things that they were talking about online. As I say, like, this thing is absolutely a comedy. The music in it is brilliant and hilarious, and like whenever you go onto a website and the music starts off, like you laugh, but then you're like, ah! Like it's you really get that.
It's so frustrating every time you reload a page.
Yeah.
Are they all basically just like the Space Jam website?
Oh man,
Yes.
right. So if you're, again, like if you've no idea what we're talking about, just literally the Space Jam website is still up from that era, and it is beautiful.
But there's an interesting point, I think, because I've been playing this game as well, and for the first like couple of hours I was like, who is this game for? Like, is this game just for people who remember what, you know, the internet was like? And I think there is a bit of that, but as you like get over that initial like nostalgia wave and it just hits you like square in the face, there's actually like a really interesting like detective puzzle game in here, like that. It is that lovely feeling of like tracking stuff down and like following the threads of pages onto another page, onto another page, onto another page, until you find that thing that you're looking for.
That's exactly it. And I think that there are two kind of camps of this, right? Like for me, I think like the thing I loved about this is the writing, the art, the like in jokes, the fact that they really do know what they're talking about, like and how it really does capture, Pokemon, Winamp, desktop toys, spy, like people, like the early internet spyware nonsense, like Bonsai Buddy.
It's super strange playing this game and then quitting to your desktop, because it simulates the complete desktop experience. So you can download programs, you can download apps, you can set your wallpaper, you can download like antivirus software. One of the first things that happens is you get a virus and you have to download the virus software to clear it from your computer. And it does all this little stuff, like, because you're always like clicking in windows and searching in a browser, and then when you close back to your desktop, like, you know that feeling when you booted up a computer in HD for the first time, you're like, wow, the icons are tiny and defined, and there's no rough edges to anything. Like, I can't see the pixels anymore.
It's like you're in the grid.
No, it is exactly that. And like I think if any of those like touch points are like immediately sparking things of like, memories of like being on the internet in the era of like the millennium bug, right? Like if that sort of thing like gets to you, if you remember in Carter's Mind Maze, like you will really like these things. I actually don't think I would want to play a version. I wouldn't want to play the sequel to this game where they do the internet now. Like,
you want a prequel at least.
I feel like I kind of feel like there's like it's that kind of glory era of the internet that you kind of. I definitely rose tint this era of the internet to myself, because I remember it really strongly and having a great time with it and feeling like this was the future, and it was really exciting. And then like going back and doing it, like playing around with this, it's just been a really great nostalgia trip, but it's also been, and really funny, but it also has kind of highlighted this thing of like, oh yeah, like we had this really great power and, you know, opportunity, and really all we did was we put up stupid pictures of our bandmates and yeah, like sort of squandered it a bit. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. And again, this might be the third podcast in a row, but if you like In Carter Core,
I know, honestly. What is it? Well, I had a haircut the other day. The barber's in my village is open. I didn't go for a lockdown haircut simply because we didn't have the clippers, and I didn't trust my partner, who doesn't measure anything, to create a symmetrical haircut. So
measure? Right. How does your hair get cut? Do you take a ruler with you?
With scissors, you know, they gauge, they look, they stop and look around and go, oh yeah, hang on, that needs to be cut a little shorter. That's what I mean. I don't mean like getting a set square out and us, you know.
Did you go to Tony?
I didn't go to Tony's, no. Apologies, Tony. I stayed in the village.
Oh, Tony will know.
I know, I feel really bad. But it was getting too long. I got to the point where I could feel a draft on the back, you know, it was going underneath the hair on the back of my neck and lifting it up.
Oh, that's when you know it's going well. That's when you know you're hitting that sweet spot.
It was like, you know, the bottom of your grandparents' sofa, where you've got the little curtain at the bottom of your sofa, that thing. It was a bit like that at the back.
The thing you've got to watch out for, Kris, is in my experience, because I flit around hairdressers a lot, I have no allegiance to particular hairdressers. So I'll just go to whatever's most economical and will save me the most time in terms of do I have to queue or not. And every single time I've gone to a new hairdresser's, they always critique the work of the previous hairdresser. No matter what happens is there's always something wrong with it, or they've not done anything right. So Tony gonna know.
He's gonna know, of course.
He's gonna know.
He gonna know. And also, like, I absolutely love that in all walks of life in which people have like a skill, whether that be a haircut, repairing your car, putting in an extension on your house. Oh, it looks like you've hired an absolute charlatan to do this.
We got some right cowboys here.
Yeah, it's just
no. But the weird thing was, I had to go. I had to wait outside until the person inside had left. The previous person. I went in. I had to go with a mask on. And one thing I hadn't realised. Well, there's two things really, because I have been wearing a mask in places. Wearing glasses. They steam up immediately.
Yes. If you're wearing a mask, yeah.
Add to that also that when you're getting your hair cut and you're wearing a mask, basically what you've got is a little dustpan that is stuck to the front of your face. And I had quite a lot of hair, and it's quite rough and wiry. And after a while, these flecks of hair would just go down and they'd just catch in this mask. And it was up to the point where I felt if I took the mask off, I would just have like a proper full-on goatee of just my own hair just stuck to my face. Right. And it was going up my nose, in my mouth and everything. And I got to this really awful bit where the barber was there with the razor, the electric razor on the side of my head like that, and I could feel myself about to sneeze. And, you know, it's never good to sneeze when you're having a haircut anyway, but when you're sneezing into a mask that is full of hair and it cannot go anywhere else. Oh, it was awful. It was just awful. Basically, for half a second, my mask just inflated, then deflated.
It's a bit like in those cartoons where they put something over a grenade.
And everyone knew what was going on under that mask, because everything has just basically come out and then just stuck everything back to my face. And obviously you can't just walk out the shop and just take it off straight away, because you've got everything, all this detritus stuck to the front of your face. So I had to walk home with it and just come in and just kind of shake it off and stuff. But yeah, surreal really.
It's been good though. Like, was slightly weird that things have been almost maybe returning to some sort of normality.
Yeah.
Like, me and my wife keep on doing things, and like we had my brother-in-law, her brother, and his partner over for. We had a takeaway and we played Six Nimmt last night. And after it finished, it was just like, that felt almost normal. Like, we were still like really conscious of things, and luckily we have a downstairs loo, and we always have that as kind of like the COVID loo. So if we've had anyone over like in the garden, they've needed to like use the loo in an emergency, we've always made sure that loo is like clean, and there's a separate towel that they can use, and there's hand sanitizer on the way in and way out. So that's still like the designated sort of coronavirus toilet, whilst people can now actually come into our house and visit. So that's still slightly weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's those moments now we turn to each other and go, that was just like it used to be before. Like, and I was lucky enough that the first weekend that we were allowed to have people in our house, Kris came round, and we sort of ate Pringles. I remember that.
Yeah, we each had a separate tub though, a little tube.
Yeah, of course. One of the best things to come out of this incident is insisting on two separate tubs of Pringles.
You and Lisa had to share one. I had one to myself. It was glorious.
One tub of Pringles per household. What flavours did you go for though?
Paprika.
Oh, the best flavour, Dan.
Good choice.
Kris, I was very reticent about paprika. I always thought it was a bit like ready salted in like, I'll eat them, but you know. But then I actually tried them and they're super nice. It's that little hint of chili in the background that gets you.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the paprika. Like that little like hint of smokiness and sweetness is nice, but it's that little like draft of chili through the crisp that really helps.
Without kind of delving too far down the Pringle rabbit hole,
do please.
The Pringle.
Everyone tried the chili cheese flavour. It's only kind of ever limited edition, but chili cheese flavour Pringles.
Chili cheese?
Yeah.
No.
Chili cheese flavour.
Absolutely delicious. I had them like years ago. I found them once, and then my wife, because I'd always talked about how they're the most amazing crisps ever, and my wife managed to find them like a couple of years later. She found this kind of like somewhere online that was selling this Spanish version of these chili cheese Pringles, and they're amazing. So seek them out.
So yeah, we had a good time though, Sam, wasn't it? And I know your toilet very well. That was a toilet in which I cracked my head open, lest we forget. And we sat down because Sam was super excited because he had a backlog of games that he...
so many.
Basically,
all we did was sit there and just play through this back catalogue of games, at which point he let out a sigh of relief.
Like I said, this kind of sounds like therapy for Sam.
Yeah, well, just because lockdown happened just around my birthday, and I got for my birthday like El Dorado... Valley of the Kings, Undaunted Normandy, and Great Western Trail, and we managed just to squeeze in Valley of the Kings and El Dorado just before lockdown happened. And so I have never played Undaunted Normandy before, and I've only like played Great Western Trail a couple of times. So it was the first time showing that game to Kris, and I think he really enjoyed it.
Loved it.
And the first time we played Undaunted Normandy, which actually is... we kind of just played like the first starter mission.
So good though.
But we also played Cartographers, which we were kindly sent from Thunderworks Games all the way from America. It left Thunderworks Games depot or warehouse or whatever at the end of March. It then proceeded to sit in a Chicago airport for about 2 months. And then only a couple of weeks ago, it was... fortunate enough to arrive on my doorstep. And Kris, you pointed me towards Cartographers ages and ages and ages ago. This is even before it was nominated for the Kennerspiel de Jahres, and that's like the connoisseurs game of the year, I think is what it translates to. It's definitely got a bit of the prestige in it. But like, what was it about the game, Kris, that you thought, like, why did you say, this would be something that Sam would like?
Well, I knew that both you and Lisa, your wife, are very interested in roll and write games, and that's been long discussed.
Really?
Yes. I'm not going to over-labour the point here, but yes, very much so. And I felt that Cartographers was a game that was doing something a little bit different with the roll and write, but only a little bit. and just enough that made it distinctive. And there was a little bit also where you could deliberately, and I know this really chimes with you, you could deliberately dick over the other player. And yeah, I know, no, I'm not saying in a malicious sense, but in that kind of playful kind of, okay, I've got my strategy here. Oh no, what's Sam giving me now? This idea that you could, and that was one of the things that I was kind of slightly worried about, and it actually put me at ease when we played it, was actually that level of interference with the other players is very minor, actually. The beauty of it, as you'll probably discuss in a bit, is that you don't know when it's going to occur. Yeah. And it felt like they got that balance just right. There was that sense that this is my piece, it's untouchable, my piece of paper, but there is this little lingering worry that at some point a goblin is going to turn up and potentially wreck my world.
Yeah, it's super nice. So this is like a roll and write, but it's a flip and write instead. So a bit like Welcome to, you're drawing cards from a deck, and you and depending on what that card is, you then have to draw that onto your map, because you all play as cartographers, and this is set in the role player universe, which is another Thunderworks game which I haven't played. And role player is like a dice drafting game where essentially you're trying to build the best RPG character, so which is a really interesting concept. So this is a little bit like that, where essentially you're building an RPG world on this little like grid reference map. You're a cartographer going out into the world and exploring it and coming back and showing the queen of this world what you find. And so there's all like the general RPG tropes of villages, farms, big like rivers and waterways, and forests. And those are the four things that you'll put onto your map. So you flip over cards, and on that card will either be a choice of two different like things to fill in the grid, so like village or forest, or it'll be one particular icon and then a choice of two different shapes that you'll be filling in. And all the shapes are like Tetronomo style things, like so bunches of squares all put together in different sort of shapes. And so you pick the one you want, fill it in your grid, and that's it. But what Cartographers does that's slightly different, and I think one of the reasons why it stood out enough to be nominated in the Spiel des Jahres Awards and the Kennerspiel, is that it has a really, really interesting way it does scoring. The game works across the 4 seasons of the year, and at the end of each season, the game scores, but it will score differently for every single season. So when you're setting up the game, you will have 4 cards at the top of the table that have A, B, C, and D on them. And then you pick 4 other cards at random, and those define 4 different ways that you'll be able to score points during your game. So it might be you've got to get farmland next to water, and for each one that you have next to each other, you'll score 1 point. Or you need to complete an entire row and fill in all the spaces of an entire row in your grid, and for that you'll score 3 points. So how the game works is that when you get to the end of spring, you will score A and B. So you'll be trying to meet the criteria for A and B during the spring phase. Then during summer, you do B and C. Then autumn, you do C and D. And then in winter, you do D and A. So it's got this nice little like scoring mechanism which kind of always keeps things ticking and bubbling over. And what I think my wife and I think you, Kris, really enjoyed about the game is that games where you have to plan 2 or 3 steps ahead, I really struggle to enjoy. They're the kind of games I really wish I was good at. And I remember as a kid, I used to be really good at that kind of planning and foresight. But since I hit like my mid-30s, I've like lost that ability to be able to like plan 3 or 4 moves ahead and anticipate what the opponent's going to do. But because Cartographers works in this very, very simple and clear-cut way, it's really easy to be able to plan a few steps ahead, because each of the scoring mechanisms only ever correlates to one specific sort of land type. So there'll only ever be one scoring that goes to villages, only one that goes to forests, only one that goes to farms and waters, whatever. So when a card comes over that is of, say, villages, and you know that's not going to be scoring this turn, you can easily go, well, I'll plan ahead for when that is going to score then. I'll look ahead, see what I need to do, and see if that fits in somewhere in my grid. And because it's that simple and that sort of clear cut, it's really nice that then when you eventually get to that part of the game where that letter will be scoring, you go, I did that 4 turns ago. Look at that now. I'm well smart.
But what I really like is the fact that, and I suppose one of the appeals for me is that more than any other flip and write or roll and write, it's a theme that excites me. You are map makers. So you look at this and not only, yes, you're satisfying a criteria of win state. Okay, I put the kind of woodland terrain next to the water because I score points for this particular season. But actually what you're doing is you're creating a landscape, mapping a landscape that you could literally take and use in an RPG. That's what I really, really like, is the fact that you are mapping a world. It's almost like when you start in an open world game and you've got that fog of war and you can see yourself at the centre and you can only see what's directly in front of you. But the more you advance, the more that world gets fleshed out. And it's really lovely having that. And it works so well with a flip and write genre, really.
And like you said, Kris, the other sort of twist, the sort of special sauce in Cartographers is this idea of the goblin cards. So at the start of each season, there's 4 goblin cards in the game. A goblin card will get added to the deck. And when you're drawing from the deck, if you reveal a goblin card, you then have to pass your sheet of paper to an opponent, and then they will draw that shape onto your map. And for each space next to that goblin shape that's drawn, you will get -1 point at the end of the round. What's nice is if you don't reveal a goblin card, it stays in the deck, and then you're going to add another one in the next season. And we've played games where we've ended up getting to the final season and no goblin cards have shown up in the deck at all. So we know that there's 4 in there, and we've hit 2 in quick succession. And so it's lovely. It's like the only flip and write, roll and write, whatever, game that I've played that actually feels like it has an element of tension to it. That this thing could happen that could just disrupt all of these plans, all these scoring criteria that you've been sort of working towards. And it's really dynamic. It's really, really flexible. There's 16 different ways of scoring. So for every game you play, the scoring criteria of A, B, C, and D will always be different. There's 2 different maps that come straight out of the box. One of them is slightly more difficult than the other one, where it's had a bit of space filled in. There's like a canyon in the middle of the game. So it's been the first game in a long, long, long time where we've sat down and played it, Kris, and immediately we finished it and gone, should we play again?
It sounds really interesting. I think the idea of it kind of having a roll and write game with that kind of narrative drive. I think I've obviously not played as much roll and write games as you. My feeling has always been when I've played them is that I've enjoyed them, but it's for me it's just a game of numbers. It's working out the order of the numbers that I need to do it. I'm not really getting a lot of the narrative coming through, the story coming through behind the game. So if a game like Welcome To, I'm a big fan of Welcome To, but for me it's just numbers. It's the idea and the kind of the plot, I say plot, but the kind of the scenario around it doesn't really mean a lot to me. So it's actually really interesting to see that kind of that game structure, but with a solid kind of narrative device behind it.
But I get what you mean, because the story, in inverted commas, of Welcome To is you're trying to build a perfect neighborhood. But when the game is finished, it's just a messy sheet with lots of numbers and like pencil lines drawn in between stuff. And it's kind of like, yeah, I may have won, but this doesn't look great.
I don't want to live there.
Yeah, you don't want to live there. However, with Cartographers, like even if you don't take the time to do it, and you're not drawing every tree perfectly, and you're not drawing every single house perfectly, like it doesn't matter. Even at the end of the game, you have something which looks like a map, like it looks like a place that things could exist within. And while I was playing it the other day, and I was waiting for my wife to take a turn, I just started like drawing roads in between some of the.
Oh, that's lovely.
some of the like the locations, and I started like shading in some of the villages and all this kind of stuff. And I've seen online that people play this with like colored pencils, because every single different terrain has a different color with it. So people actually color in the green forests and put in the blue rivers and the more tan, darker brown colors of the farmland. So people are actually using this game to create maps. So I totally understand how that might appeal to you, Dan, that you actually finish the game and win or lose, you'll still feel like you've created something out of it.
Listen, the internet is a magical and beautiful and powerful thing, and it has brought us a question from one of our listeners.
Oh.
So we have @LoneGamesman to thank for this question. They sent this, I'm assuming, via Twitter. Thank you very much for that. You can do that via Twitter. You can do it via Facebook. You can do it via email, stayinginpod@gmail.com. Send us a question. We've run out of questions, so send us a question. Okay. Question is, get your thinking hats on. Do you consider Kickstarter, brackets, board games, video games, or other forms of projects, a force for good or the downfall of civilization, or maybe something in between? Do you like what Kickstarter offers as a potential backer? That's a very good question. I feel like I got really excited about Kickstarter to begin with. I do like to support things early on if I can. If I feel like, like Fowers, for example. I mean, I've not backed them, but Kris, you're a fan of Fowers and
very much so, yes,
and the good stuff there. And obviously, that's the kind of game that wouldn't get made maybe if there wasn't Kickstarter. Like little projects where it's you test the water. You don't have to get it into stores. You don't have to put it onto the internet. You can just say, hey, how many of you people want to give me 30 quid?
I'm not as experienced as you and Sam are with Kickstarters. I've only really backed a couple of things, actually. Recently, I backed an RPG from Rebellion within the 2000 AD universe, and that's really interesting. I quite like, as you say, Pete, having something there, forgetting about it sometimes, and suddenly, ping, the Kickstarter app gives me an update. And what I quite like about what Tim Fowers does is that you're very much part of that. You feel like you're part of the process, strangely. I was sent, we were all sent the rules in advance, not to look at, but to actually make suggestions on how we can make things clearer. I've not really engaged with it, but it's been fascinating to watch other people do that, and to be part of that collective endeavour with somebody who's far off somewhere else, who is using Kickstarter to work with, and I hate to use that kind of capitalist term, but yeah, what is essentially a kind of a customer. I've paid for something. I'm kind of in some respects, I'm a shareholder of this particular product to some extent, and it is a surreal experience. I see that bit as a bonus for me personally. It's not a reason why I get into it. For me, it's because I'm interested in the product and I want to see it out there. And if this is the only way in which I'm going to see it, so be it, really.
I mean, I must have backed a few now. I must have backed a dozen, maybe a dozen. I mean, how many have you backed, Sam?
Yeah, about that. I mean, I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yep, so actually,
10 different
same
things.
here. Yeah,
I've done 3. So I too have backed the adventure RPG from Rebellion. I backed a artist's kind of book in terms of learning how to draw, because that was something I was interested in. And then obviously, I mean, the sole reason why Kickstarter should exist and should be hailed by everyone, Kickstarter brought us Shenmue 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, need I say more, really? The fact is, that game could not get made. It could not get made. And then Kickstarter walked along and they went, you know what? Yeah, go for it.
There we go. So in Dan's eyes, it's the saviour of everything.
One of the things I also like is looking at... So I tend to back things that are like either very small teams or individuals where I'm like, this isn't going to get picked up by someone much, much bigger, but you also clearly know what you're doing and you've set the...
Yes.
I get really, as a producer, I get really like excited when I see that somebody's scoped something really well. Like I look at something and I go, that's really doable, and I know you can do it, so I'm going to give you 30 quid. Like, so one of the things we've backed recently is a game called Artifact. Yes. And in fact, we didn't back it recently. It's come through recently, and I was really excited about that because I was like, I wanted to get involved in the Zine Quest, which is this thing that Kickstarter does every year, and I wanted to back something, and it was like, this is a solo RPG. I'd love to give that a go. It's going to be really creative, and the art for it looks great. And so clearly, yes, like, and it's cheap entry price, and this person seems pretty right on and pretty nice and level-headed. Here you go. Here's the money. Whereas, like, I could do that, or I could go and buy D&D, but like, it feels like you're kind of contributing to the cultural improvement of like the whole.
I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of where my skepticism comes from. Is that how I see Kickstarter is, this is my chance to enhance the individual, or this is my chance to support a very individual idea. For me, it feels more of a space to push those ideas to the front. Yeah. And I think I can always go into a game shop and buy X, Y, and Z, but there are like Artifact, like Delve is another solo RPG that I backed recently, things like Champions of the Wild and Tempwork Assassins was the first thing I ever backed on Kickstarter. Like, these are things in some cases where I met the person who was making it, and like knowing that I was able to contribute to it, and them knowing that I was one of the hundreds or so people who really liked what they were doing to put some money behind it. It feels like it's a place that really makes that kind of difference to someone's career and their development and their life, rather than throwing money towards a company or a corporation.
I think any kind of environment that is able to give a platform to new voices that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to get an idea that they have made. And so this gives someone an opportunity to put it out into a domain, have people look at it and say, you know what, yes, this is a great idea. I want to help you do that.
Yeah. Pete, if your band was around now, would you use Kickstarter, do you think?
Yeah, Kickstart the album.
Kickstart, yeah.
Table of Tears.
Oh, Table of Tears.
My lonely head.
A bathtub of tranquility.
Yes, the thought remains. Was that the name of the band?
Oh, that would be good. The thought remains. Oh.
Are you looking at band name generators by any chance?
No. These are just all off the top of my... I was very good in the late 90s.
I was very good in the late 90s.
Of coming up with emo-style band
Well, I mean, I
names.
want to generate... we've got Bewitched Midwinter.
My Framed Distrust. There you go, there's another
Wounded Castle.
Ooh.
Flesh Breath.
Peter Willington and Flesh Breath.
Number one this week, Climbing 3, Flesh Breath.
Incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, Peter's asked me to let you know that he once played on the same stage as Matthew Bellamy.
Oh, God,
Flesh Breath.
That was Staying In with me, Sam Turner. There was Chris Darby, there was Daniel Frost, and there was rock superstar Peter Willington. If you know the name of his band, then please do get in touch with us straight away. Twitter @StayingInPod, Facebook @StayingInPod, and Instagram @StayingInPod. Or you can email us stayinginpod@gmail.com. And even if you don't know the name of his band, then please just take a guess, because it's lots of fun thinking up names of 90s bands. Also, I've got to say a big thank you to everyone at Thunderworks Games. Thank you for sending us a copy of the wonderful Cartographers. I know it was a long time in coming, mainly caused by shipping delays from the coronavirus, but it was definitely worth the wait. And thank you as well to you for listening. We know that it's difficult enough at the moment to stay safe and follow the rules and keep up to date with exactly what's going on. So we really appreciate it that you're taking the time to download our show every couple of weeks and listen to what we have to say, even though sometimes it's complete bobbins. So thank you so much for everything you do to support the show. Until next time, bye-bye.